What's up all you X-Men loving dudes and dudettes, ToyShiz here, and if you'll allow me for just a second, I want to remind everyone what toy collecting was like back in the day, and for that you have to look none other than Toy Fair magazine. If you were around in the 90s, if you were a comic book collector, comic book enthusiast, or just a toy collector in general, then you were undoubtedly hyped for the Onslaught character. This was the event of events. It rebooted Iron Man, Captain America, the Avengers without really calling it a reboot. Heroes Reborn, I believe it was called. But Onslaught was that entity. He was the guy that the X-Men had to go up and stop, and it involved everyone. And a few well-timed punches by the Incredible Hulk, they managed to defeat Onslaught. But he was just the character. Everybody was talking about this guy back in the day. And when you opened up Toy Fair magazine, that's where you would find most of your action figure news, and flipping the pages, finding out from every single month to month what was coming out. Every couple of months you get a new wave, but when you saw the Onslaught wave sitting there on the pages, that's when you were like, ooh, this is going to be something. The sculpts were different. These were big friggin' characters. They had lots of accessories, and you knew who they were from knowing about the Onslaught storyline. It was just fun. These looked cool. They weren't exactly easy to find in some senses. I'm just going to say that. Toys R Us, KB Toys, they had them, but you could never find them all in one go. And of course, the main one everybody wanted to get was Onslaught, and he was just very cool. Just the colors alone for this guy, the different transitionary changes that he went through in the comics, it was all here. But it was just a fantastic wave, and we're going to check them out today on Retro-Shiz. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a nice hot cup of 90s coffee. This is the 1997 Toybiz Collector's Marvel Edition Onslaught Wave. Now, before going any further, if you'd like to know more about Onslaught, I highly recommend checking out Comics Explained or Dope Spill Comics. Those are great guys to listen to, and they go into heavy detail, kind of summarizes it really fast for you if you don't want to take the time that's necessary these days to read comics, which I totally understand. But essentially this, Professor X and Magneto had a mind baby, and it turned out to be evil, and it wanted to destroy the Marvel Universe. I mean, there's a whole much more complicated mess to it, but that's it in a nutshell. And the X-Men for back in the 90s were known for AOA and Onslaught. It was the big events, and Marvel now runs with that on a weekly to monthly basis, it seems like these days. However, the first figure up was Jean Grey, and this was one of the first instances we got of her in her Jim Lee traditional X-Men animated sort of attire. And she did come with two accessories. She had the Juggernaut trapped in the Ruby Sidorak, and then her Psychic Claw. And while this Jean Grey was sculpted fairly just okay, I'd say it's an okay figure at best, cannot stand worth a darn, and also is incredibly tall considering all the other figures of that day, which put her out of a lot of different scale. You know what I mean? She was entirely too tall, overly sculpted, pre-posed, we'll just say. But the Juggernaut was interesting. It was actually a really nice, just small PVC figure, painted thoroughly. Like, it was just the right colors on everywhere you wanted to see it on a tiny little Juggernaut figure. The two halves of the Ruby enclosed him, and he looks like he's trying to punch his way out. Straight from the comics, too, which is actually pretty cool. He and Jean Grey. The Psychic Claw, however, is entirely too heavy. It's an interesting shape, and it is articulated. It's supposed to fit over her head, but again, good luck trying to stand her. It just doesn't work much of anything for it. It looks good on the new Marvel Legends Jean Grey, if you're a modern Marvel Legends collector. Not the best figure in this wave, a worthy attempt, but there are much better figures that we're going to talk about, including this Apocalypse Rising figure. Now, again, seeing this guy for the first time in Toy Fair magazine, I was like, what? And I didn't really remember this from the Onslaught storyline. He also came with his little buddy Ozymandias, who's a statue in this round, but he looks awesome. I love the colors of the red mixed with the wash of the blacks and the blues. His really kind of ocean green sort of style really works well. He's got all his purple tubes in and out of his back and his arms. He's entirely just, overly sculpted to a degree that he just looks fantastic. He does have some interesting articulation to him as well. He's got a great face to him, but this was a big figure, a big monstrous figure than what we were used to getting. Ozymandias, again, waking him up in the Onslaught storyline, trying to be like, yo, there's this new guy on town, you might want to take his powers. Interesting, a fun little accessory figure, really well sculpted, very ornate base to him. And of course, on the bottom is where he had these little wheels where you could kind of just push him around and things like that. So again, much better, I think, as a cohesive whole than the Jean Grey figure, but still just a great, interesting design for Apocalypse, the sculpt, the colors, his face. He just looks mad that he got woken up. And there ain't nothing wrong with that. And now which brings us to the Wolverine Unleashed figure. And to a degree, yeah, Wolverine kind of started this whole deal. Magneto tore the adamantium from his bones, which started Professor X being like, I can't take this no more. And that's when he psychically attacked him, kind of led to the whole Onslaught being unleashed. Franklin Richards, however, is his accessory, which is a decent accessory if you know the Onslaught storyline. But this was one of the first times we were getting a Wolverine with the bone claws. And also a heck of a lot of furry, just hair all over Wolverine. And it was good. I mean, see, this is what I mean. This is classic 90s Toybiz goodness, but it's the bone claws. I really love the design of these. It's very comic booky. They're all jagged. They're all different shapes. He's all torn up. I like his boots. Very pre-posed, unfortunately. Big hands. A lot of glue where they kind of attached all the things. It's just something that is very noticeable. It was just kind of like, okay, maybe the factory just was into glue or something like that. Again, a huge figure. And Franklin Richards being a small figure, Onslaught in the comics, wanting this little guy to obtain his mutant powers and really just start taking control over everything. He's got his Fantastic Four hat, and on the back of his t-shirt, Toybiz, China. You know how it is. Again, pre-posed, not any articulation to him. He kind of looks like he's doing his force push, but it's a great little team up. You got Wolverine, little buddy, you can sit him on top of his shoulder, something to that degree. Awesome Wolverine, entirely too big for the character and what he was in the comics. But again, it's a very fun look at Wolverine, and one that we haven't seen since. And of course, this finally brings us to the big bad mamma jamma of the wave, Onslaught himself. Count how many times I've said the name Onslaught in this video. But in looking at this guy, remember all my friends used to call him Onslaught. If you've seen my Instagram posts recently, we all used to have a good laugh out of that guy. Came with several snap-on pieces, which kind of elevated him to his more advanced looks as the comic storyline progressed, but he's just a fantastically designed character. So iconic. You see this guy and you're just like, that's the red, the purples. Even when you didn't know the whole storyline or who Onslaught was at the time, you're like, that's weird. He looks like Magneto. On the packaging, though, it did boast, turn Onslaught around and find out the true identity, which of course is Professor Xavier, locked away within the body of Onslaught. With the snap-on procedures, you know, as he kind of gained more power and started to advance, even though it's kind of like the monster armor, it doesn't really fit around both sides, we'll just say. He looks good on the front, but you snap the top piece on, he goes to his mutant devil crab looking face, zombie face, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different instances of this guy, but for the most part, he's all the same. But I love his big snap-on pieces. He looks monstrous. He looks ferocious. He's Onslaught, and you really can't ask for something better. And if you're a Marvel Legends collector, these pieces actually hook on fairly well, which give you a really cool, interesting new design to the already present figure. So I would just say run, X-Man, run, because Onslaught is coming for you. So really that is going to wrap it up for this classic wave. This Onslaught wave, so many great characters, such a detailed, big line of characters. This was amazing for back in the day. So much fun to see, finally getting a Jean Grey, even though it didn't really work out all that well. Getting that very feral Wolverine, that was fun as well. Love the bone claws, having them pop in and out. Juggernaut himself being stuck in the ruby, and then just Onslaught, Apocalypse, Ozymandias, Franklin Richards. Just an interesting cavalcade of characters, and just they made for such great action figures. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Did you have these back in the day? Do you have to get them now? Were you a fan of Onslaught or any of that storyline? Comment below, let me know. and let's talk everything X-Men. And thank you for tuning into my X-Men month. I think you're really going to like next week's Retro-Shiz, a little bit of now and then sort of deal. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. As always, drink some great coffee, eat some great food, but most importantly, remember, when you get the powers of Franklin Richards, all bets are off. And when you do, let me know what you found. I'll talk to you guys soon. Adios.